for inviting me. So sitting here and listening to previous talks, I realized that in my talk there will no be. I mean, I'm not going to talk about vision or future. So I guess it's more down to earth, physical layer kind of things. So, for sort of people who are more interested in networks and system architecture, I guess what you can take away from my talk is sort of a peek to kind of questions that you can ask your information theory colleagues, to help you with the development of next generation networks and systems. Okay, so let me start with an example of the Gaussian additive white Gaussian noise channel. Okay, so this model is the most canonical of all and the simplest sort of a wireless channel you can imagine. So here we have a real number, as a collection of real number or a vector in n-dimensional space, right? And as you transmit it across the channel, what happens is that instead of getting the clean signal, you get some kind of additive Gaussian noise perturbation. So then the coding question is to come up with the constellation, right, in this n-dimensional space. You want to come up with the constellation of great many code words or points such that they are all mutually pairwise separated. Then, I mean, when you pass this any of these points across the Gaussian channel, I mean, the perturbation is insufficient to sort of fool you into producing the incorrect decoding to fool the decoder. Okay, so mathematically, what I'm going to be interested in is this quantity r star of n epsilon, which is the maximal achievable rate. So it's the maximal number of bits you can transmit in n-channel uses. So this is the crucial sort of slide if you never heard about information theory, because this seems like a very simple definition. But let me assure you that because of we are never interested in n or this dimension, 1, 2, or 3. We are the sort of the goal here is to analyze n equals 1,000 or more. And for this reason, I mean, if I ask you to compute this quantity directly from the definition, then you have to basically optimize, I mean, even for n equals 20, right? You have to optimize constellations of millions of points in 20-dimensional space. So it's computationally impossible to compute. So this is a quantity which you can define, but you can never compute, right? So for this reason, that's why, I mean, information theory praises its creator, Claude Shannon, who managed to, even though you cannot compute this quantity for n equals 20, he managed to compute it for n equals 10 trillion. So when n goes to infinity, it turns out that computing this quantity is not hard. Right, so in particular for Gaussian channel, you get the famous 1/2 log 1 plus SNR formula, and this is what this maximal achievable rate will converge to. Okay, so now the story starts here from this plot. This was obtained by me about maybe 8 years ago, and you can see here that as this block length, as the dimensionality of the space grows, the maximal achievable rate, thank you. So the maximal achievable rate starts to, I mean, you expect it to grow, and then this is what Shannon predicts. This is the capacity, right? So you know that as block length goes to 10 trillion, you will already be able to send half a bit per second per channel use. Now for finite n, of course, as I told you, we cannot compute exactly this number, but what I did is I computed some upper and lower bounds, so then I basically squeezed in this unknown quantity to this tiny region. And okay, so now from time to time I may accidentally say that this was practically motivated, but in this room, I mean, in my community, I'm safe to say that because information theorists are notoriously impractical. But here, I guess, when I say practical, I really apologize. I mean, this is information theory practical. Yeah. So in particular, you see, so this lower bound, it says that there exist codes, right? But of course, we cannot build them because they use maximum likelihood decoders, so you cannot really make them work on a chip. Okay. So. Right, so then you can see that, for example, I mean, quantities like delay are non-negligible, right? So if you want to talk about achieving capacity, say, to within even 10%, you're already talking about this block length of 3,000, right? So, for example, returning to Ananta's example of this nanoamp radius, right? So Ananta would probably be very unhappy if I asked him to, use this nanoamp radio and produce the code. I mean, and ask him to decode the codes of block length 3000, right? So for this reason, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that if you are into sort of short packet or short block length or small delay regimes, then capacity may be not the right number, because it's just basically could be 20, 30, 40% off, right? Okay. So yeah, so then the next thing we did is we studied the asymptotic behavior of this quantity. So okay, so you can get this 3-term expansion. So you can see that as n grows, as this block length grows, this rate converges to 1/2 log 1 plus p. This is the Shannon business, and the speed of convergence is 1 over root n, right? So this is the important thing to take away from here. Okay, so now the good thing about this asymptotic approximation is that you can actually compute it. So computing those upper and lower bounds is still challenging. So there is a code to be written, but computing this, asymptotic expansion, right? The first 3 terms of the asymptotic expansion is a closed form expression, and you can see that time and time again for different channels we keep testing this, and it turns out that this approximation seems to be rather good. Until you hit some very, very low block lengths. Okay, so right, and you can predict in particular the latency rate trade-offs. Okay, so now let's talk about the wireless channel. So this was the previous work that I did a long time ago. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention that all this wireless, all this work on fading channels is with this. Collaboration with many people from Sweden, and actually these guys have some intimate connection to Ericsson, so they know some details which are considered to be really practical, which I don't know. So yeah, gentlemen from Hong Kong, Bobby Koch from Madrid, and Austin Collins from MIT. He's a student here.
Can I ask a question just before you go to the next topic on that? If you compare the modulation and coding schemes that are currently used in LTE and the block sizes, where are they on that?
Yeah, excellent question. So actually, I mean, yeah, so after, for 8 years we've been doing things like this, but I will have a slide on this. Okay. Not for the Gaussian channel, but for the fading channel. Oh. So you will see, right? But a rule of thumb is that they're about 80% away from capacity. So 80% away from this trade-off. So, oh, sorry, you're asking about the actual LTE codes. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, like QAM.
Yes. You mean modulation plus turbo code on top, right? So yeah. Because you also. Okay. Yeah. So for this, I'll have a slide. Yes, later. Yeah. But 80% was a number. This is for state-of-the-art LDPC codes. Say, if you go to Qualcomm and ask them to sell to sell you the best code, this is going to be something. That, okay. So right. So what is the fading channel? So the fading channel is the Gaussian channel with the sort of fluctuating SNR, right? So maybe due to mobility or some other random artifacts, what happens is now instead of getting y equals x plus z, you get some random multiplier, and it turns out that this multiplier changes. I mean, if you never heard about any channel models before, you can say, okay, how different this is. Okay, you had additive noise, now you have additive and multiplicative. Turns out that this changes everything quite significantly, and there is, So in particular, for example, already the question of, okay, who knows H? Who knows this channel state, the instantaneous channel gain? So you can come up with 4 different cases, right? So who knows this channel state? Transmitter, receiver, nobody, or both. Some of them are a little bit more contrived than others, right? I mean, how can a transmitter know the channel gain? But maybe due to channel reciprocity, it can actually do that. Anyway, so the thing is that there are 4 cases to consider, but more importantly for my talk is that there are actually, the question is how do you model the channel dynamics? So in this talk, I will mostly talk about what is called piecewise constant or block fading. So here, this is the depiction of this model. What happens here is that we consider that this channel gain stays constant for some n, some c coherence time, and after that it jumps to a new independently generated number. Right? So the statistics of it is always considered to be null. Okay, so what does the classical information theory teach you? Okay, so classical information theory is all about taking the limits, right? So there are two popular approaches. So, I mean, you come to an information theorist and you say, okay, my block length is, let's say, 1,000, and he will ask you, okay, how many diversity branches or how many independent realizations do you see? Well, this may be some number, maybe 10, maybe 20, right? Depends on the dynamics of velocity, mobility, and so on. But then information theorist, what he will do is he will say, okay, I cannot compute things for, for fixed coherence time and fixed number of diversity branches. I have to take one of them to infinity, unfortunately. So if he takes the number of, if he takes the coherence time to infinity and assumes just that every block is humongous, then this is called the outage capacity. And so Jerry Foschini was from Bell Labs was the first to sort of notice that actually multiple antennas help a lot in the outage capacity setting. Now, if you, on the other hand, if you fix the coherence time and you take the number of diversity branches to infinity, right? So then basically you have a lot of realizations, so you can average things. This is called ergodic setting, and then the key quantity is ergodic capacity. Okay, and so here's some references too. Okay, so so let me first consider. Right. So what I was going to tell you is that okay, so this is the classical information theory, right? It tells you nothing about finite NC or finite L, but it gives you two limits, and later we will see how those limits play against the actual numbers. Okay, so now what we do in my work, in the work of my colleagues and the students. So what we do is we consider these three different situations where, again, we don't take anything to infinity, but we consider that, for example, the number of diversity branches is small and the coherence time is humongous compared to. So this is typically the setting of low mobility, right? So when anyways, you understand. So right. So this is the second scenario is where we play the other game. We say, okay, no, now coherence time is fixed, and you observe terribly many copies of terribly many diversity branches. And finally, just for fun, in the last couple of years, what we decided to also see what our computational tools could give us for the case when both the coherence time and the number of diversity branches is small. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about the second item. One reason for this is that Austin Collins actually must have presented it in wireless at MIT retreat a week ago, so this gives me an excuse. Okay, so let me talk first about this regime of quasistatic fading. So quasistatic. Okay, so the simplest case is when you just observe when the number of diversity branches is 1. So the game here is the following. So the nature generates one channel gain, right? And this channel gain stays frozen forever. And let's just, even for simplicity, consider single antennas. Okay, so the outage capacity was computed. I mean, it's very easy to compute. Some standard expression. Okay, so now the important thing is that here, none of the differences of the 4 regimes of channel state knowledge are important. Why? Because you can, I mean, since the channel gain stays fixed, you can learn it with very few pilots, right? You can send one pilot and just, or maybe 200 pilots, right, and just learn it perfectly at the receiver. And for transmitter, it's useless because you cannot do any beamforming, right? It's just SISO. It's just okay. So, all right. So what did we prove? So this is the math statement. So here we proved that the conversions to the outage capacity of this. So for finite n, right? So or for growing n, you converge not with the speed 1 over root n as for the Gaussian channel, but surprisingly with faster speed. And many people were surprised at this, and actually, initially, I mean, the initial reaction is usually for people to try to say, okay, are you telling me that fading actually helps? No, that's not what I'm saying. Of course, fading reduces the capacity, but what I'm saying is that you can converge to that capacity with much shorter block codes. So you don't need those humongous block codes of, tens of thousands of channel users. So you can do that with much shorter block codes. So okay, so here's the numerical example. Again, so this is the same range of block lengths as before, and you can see that here, okay, so first of all, my bounds are worse because this channel model is harder, and but you converge much faster. You can see that you converge to within 90% of capacity. This is the horizontal line with already a few hundred channel users. Okay, so that's a good thing. So this black line corresponds to the speed of convergence for the Gaussian channel of the same capacity. So you can see that this indeed Gaussian channel sort of requires you much longer block codes. Okay, so let me, so this number of 1400 is what you need to achieve 90% of capacity of the Gaussian channel. And right, so then we computed this number for a different number of receive antennas. So I was talking about SISO, but actually SIMO is the same thing. Okay, so you can see that this is always like at least 5 times smaller, or maybe 3 times smaller. So in particular, it's in the order of a few hundred typically. Okay, so right, so let me skip this. This is the answer to your question. So this is the simulation by Ericsson of the LTE advanced codes. So you can see that actually, when the first time we got this, it looked to us that these asterisks repeat the shape of the Gaussian channel, fundamental limits, and it was very, intuitively, it was very natural to say that, okay, these codes were designed for the Gaussian channel, right? Fading was an afterthought, basically. It's a little bit of a hack. So maybe they do converge as if they don't exploit this. And I kept saying this until one smart guy told me, no, Yury, you're an idiot, because the reason they converge so slow is because they don't exploit the shaping gain. And, so maybe that's true. Yeah, I don't know. So we before he said this, I always thought that this is due to the error floor, and roughly that corresponds to Gaussian channel. But okay, maybe this is the shaping gain. I don't know. Right. So okay. So this is the sort of the extension to MIMO. It all works, and a moment of reflection can tell you that actually you can think of when you have several diversity branches, not one, then you can just think of it as a block diagonal MIMO channel, right? So just stack together different time realizations. So in particular, all this stuff extends to from L equals 1 to L greater than 1. All right, so let me tell you now about this third project that we undertook recently, where we just considered very small block lengths. Okay, so this is the motivation slide. Again, so 5G, we want small packets. Why? Because traffic's vehicle V2V communication, and energy constraints and so on. So we want high reliability short packets. And the question we wanted to ask ourselves is, okay, so if you want all of this, how we should use antennas, how much we should do, how much training should we do, and so on. So I think Eric mentioned that there's a huge overhead when you go to multiple antennas for the training and pilots and so on. So this is a question we also were wondering, especially for very short packets. Okay, so again, here's the channel model, right? So we have a multiple antenna channel. We have L realizations of this random matrix, which multiplies our channel inputs. Now I'm going to talk about the no channel state information case or non-coherent case. Reasons for this is, as I said, we thought that maybe, if you want to design something like this nanoamp radio or something very, very low power, then you probably don't want to keep it always on to track the channel, to provide the feedback link to the receiver, right, and so on. So anyway, so it looks like maybe it's not a bad idea to study the no CSI case, but also more importantly for us, you see, when you study the case of no CSI in particular, since we are talking about fundamental limits, not some ad hoc methods. So in particular, this will tell us how much we should invest into training, right? So how many pilots we should use. So this will cover the cost of obtaining CSI, because after all CSI comes from some training, right? Okay, so this is the example I'm going to use. So we took one PRB of the LTE system. So this is 168 channel inputs, or 14 OFDM symbols with 12 tones per symbol. So I'm going to focus on the packet error rate of 10 to the minus 5 and some SNR and 2x2 or 4x4 MIMO. Okay, so here's our sort of the map on which we're going to play the game. So what's the game? The game is, so we have this fixed 168 channel symbols, right? And maybe you have, as a degree of freedom, you have you can space the tones, the OFDM tones, apart in frequency so far that they will actually observe different diversity branches, right? And so then this is what horizontal axis is. So suppose that you can play with the number of diversity branches, right? Between 1 and 168, actually we truncated at 42. Why? Because if you think about it, then already obtaining diversity greater than 12, right? Because 12 is the number of tones per OFDM symbol that the LT allows you. It's kind of questionable. How do you obtain greater than 12? I mean, then you have to separate these OFDM symbols very far apart in time. But then why do you treat it as a symbol, right? I mean, as a packet. And this, I mean, if this, anyway. So we can. I mean, I think that L greater than 12 is just plotted for theoretical as a theoretical curiosity, at least in this sort of a 3GPP setting, LT setting. Okay, so what's the game here? So okay, so we have this number of diversity branches which ranges between 1 and 168, and the question is what's the maximum achievable rate, right? So what's the best system that anybody can create, can achieve? Again, if you ask a classical information theorist, he will tell you, well, I'm sorry, I refuse to answer this question because I need to take something to infinity, right? And he has two choices: either approximate the number of diversity branches as if it was infinite, and then he would get the ergodic capacity, which will be a function of the coherence length. And the other approach is the outage capacity approach. He would just say, okay, I'll pretend that the coherence time is infinite. Then you get some function, which is outage capacity of the number of diversity branches. So let's see how this plots. So, okay, so this is the computation of the, actually, to my shame, in information theory, after sort of 70 years after Shannon, we still can't compute this C ergodic. So this very simple maximization problem. So that's why I have to sort of apologize and say that I'm only plotting the lower bound here. But we know that this lower bound is very tight. So, but still, it's sort of okay. Anyway, so let's pretend this is a tight number. So this is the ergodic capacity. Why does it decrease as the number of diversity branches increases? Well, because remember that the product of the number of diversity branches and the coherence time is constant, right? So the ergodic capacity decreases because if the coherence time is very short, then the effective proportion, right? I mean, you have to learn the channel in some way. So then you spend it on training, and the shorter the coherence time, sort of the less you get for the useful data. So that's why. And of course, because we are talking about 2x2 MIMO, so it's interesting to consider when will you shut off the antennas, right? So I mean, because training costs you more if you have two transmit antennas. So at this point, it turns out that it's better to only use one antenna. Okay, so now for the outage capacity, this is the plot, right? So this is so the outage capacity actually grows. So remember, the outage capacity doesn't care about the coherence time because it assumes that that one is infinite. So why does it grow? Well, because as the number of diversity branches increases, you basically can average over many different channel realizations, and channel becomes as if it's constant, right? So this is yeah, similar to the effect that when you add antennas, receive antennas, sorry. Right, so that's why outage capacity grows. Okay, so let's superimpose two of them here. So this is what classical information theory tells you, and we were very curious. Okay, what's the actual truth, right? So we've been for 8 years we've been playing with these bounds, and we can compute them. So let's compute them for this channel and just see. I mean, because you see, a priori nobody tells you that either of these is actually tight or anything. So you have no idea it could land here or there, or because this is just finite n, right? Information theory tells you about some limits. So maybe they approached from above, from below. You have no idea. Okay, so it turns out that okay, so this is the paper you want to read if you care about how we did it. Right. So there's by the nature of this sort of problem, there is no analytic expressions you can expect, right? Because I don't tend anything to infinity, so there is no 1/2 log 1 plus SNR. Or any beautiful things like this, but there are some bounds which are, we consider interesting. They give you some engineering insights for when to switch off antennas and so on. So these are these bounds. This is the computation of those bounds. So you can see that indeed, the actual non-asymptotic fundamental limit does depend non-monotonically on the number of diversity branches, and actually, curiously, yeah, roughly at the same point as ergodic capacity asks you to switch off one of the antennas, roughly at the same point, you would do the same thing non-asymptotically. Okay, so right, so we also asked ourselves the question: what happens if we do some Alamuti? And you can see that it doesn't penalize you much for the unless you are in the case where you have many diversity branches, which is natural. Okay, so same thing for the 4x4 MIMO. Here there is no Alamuti, as was well known, but there is this trick FSTD, and of course it costs you a lot because you don't exploit the multiplexing gain as much. So this is the computation for 4x4. All right, so now to conclude, so let me just say that, okay, I forgot to mention that all my plots have this little ghost here, and what this ghost is this our MATLAB code base, which we carefully try, after each paper, we try to update and put all our code into that code base. And so all the plots that in particular are in this talk, you can just obtain this by using this open source code. All right, and so thank you.
The maximum rate that you computed initially for the Gaussian channel is Gaussian code book, or for example, to change the Gaussian code book, the binary or form.
Okay, right. So let me first rephrase. So that when you say Gaussian code book, right, it's just one method to achieve. So this is only for the lower bound. Right? So the upper bound is general. It's like for arbitrary form. How you produce it doesn't matter. Okay. But the lower bound is something similar to the Gaussian code book. It's spherical codes, so it's more or less the same as the Gaussian code book. Now, but what you're asking is a very good question. You say, okay, there you didn't put a restriction, so you can select those code words anywhere in the sphere. But as an engineer, right, and it's not just, I tell you to produce pi over 7 in analog, and how to pi over 7 is doable, but let's say e to the pi, right? I ask you to produce this number, how are you going to do it, right? You only quantize and do something. Right, so, I mean, of course, this is just for simplicity. In reality, we also study what we call modulation constraint challenges.
Any other questions for Yury? Okay, let's thank our speaker again.
Thank you.